I'm here with Jeremy Godfrey, the chair of BEREC. Jeremy, thanks for talking to us. Tell us about this panel that you took part in earlier today.
So the panel was about what next for the European institutions following the European Electronic Communications Code, which came into force last December and is being transposed over the next 2 years. So what I talked about was, first of all, the role of BEREC in implementing that code. So BEREC's role is to ensure a consistent application of telecoms law across Europe, and in the code there are many sets of guidelines that BEREC is mandated to do to make sure that the national regulatory agencies, the NRAs across Europe, apply the code in a consistent manner. So first of all I talked about those elements of the BEREC work programme, and then I also talked about what I thought the agenda might be for the incoming Commission and incoming Parliament, who are going to going to take up their roles during later this year. So I'm quite sure that digital issues will be a big theme for the next Commission. I think they probably won't want to redo the communications law again, because it will only be coming into full force after 2 years, and they'll need time to see how that works. But I think there will be a number of issues related to the data economy. There are issues around new forms of market power in the data economy, for example the platforms having large amounts of data which it's difficult for new entrants, innovative new companies to replicate. There are issues around privacy. There are issues of societal harm, like fake news, hate speech, disruption of elections, and so forth. There are new forms of great new potential benefits that can be got as well, in terms of things like epidemiology, doing and medical research, keeping the traffic moving in smart cities, and then of course all the potential applications of artificial intelligence that we're just scraping the surface on. So I think there'll be a huge number of issues about how best to enable Europe to take the benefits of the digital economy, but also how to build confidence amongst end users that the data economy is going to work for them and isn't going to work against their interests.
What are the implications for the fibre community?
So I think there's still a big push for investment in fibre and in very high capacity networks. So there are a number of regulatory issues around very high capacity networks which BEREC will be working on. We are doing guidelines to define what is meant by a very high capacity network, so what technologies that maybe complement fibre can also qualify as very high capacity networks, what forms of regulatory lighter forms of regulation might apply, say, to wholesale-only networks, of which many members of the Fibre to the Home Council Europe are in that business. So I think for the fibre community, they're certainly going to want to give us lots of input. I think this morning I had a meeting with some of the CEOs, and there was very interesting insights about the problems they see, some different types of competition problems that they see that they think regulators and policymakers might need to address. So I think continued engagement with BEREC, with local regulators, with the Commission, and with policymakers in member states is going to be very important.
You certainly seem to be very busy at the moment. For the benefit of our viewers, tell us about BEREC and what it does.
So BEREC consists of the national regulatory authorities for electronic communications from each of the member states, and then we also have other people who attend BEREC meetings from the EEA countries and from accession states and so forth. And the primary role of BEREC is to help facilitate a consistent application of telecommunications law across Europe. So in this year's work programme, most of what we're doing is guidelines for the code, looking again at the BEREC guidelines on net neutrality. So, as I say, making sure that we have a sensible level of harmonisation, so that pan-European operators, investors, and so forth have a degree of predictability about how individual national regulatory authorities will apply the law. That's a very important angle for us. But we, as well as focusing on that. We also have a role in contributing to discussions about forward-looking issues. So we're doing a piece of work on the dynamics of investment in very high-capacity networks, which is right at the heart of what members of the Fibre to the Home Council of Europe will care about. So we want to understand not what's the role of competition, what's the role of what can be done to help demand to develop faster, what should be done about things like copper switch off. These are all issues that will be part of that study. So it's a high-level study that looks at how all those things interact with one another and will then help us decide where we need to focus our efforts. We're also looking at 5G. So fibre, of course, will be a very important component of 5G networks. I mean, in a way, 5G networks are basically fibre networks with wireless on the end of them. And looking at, again, what are all the issues regulators and policymakers may need to look at to enable innovation in the 5G ecosystem, enable innovation in IoT. So we're looking at some of those future-looking things. And lastly, BEREC wants to further deepen its engagement with stakeholders. So we are looking to engage with stakeholders at an earlier stage in our projects. So before we actually put pen to paper and draft guidelines, we'd like to kind of gather some input. We want to give our stakeholders a bit longer to respond to our consultations, and we want to give them a formal opportunity to propose ideas for our work programme. So those are the three things that BEREC will be doing this year, working on a consistent application of telecoms law in Europe, contributing forward-looking debates, and engaging more effectively with stakeholders.
Well, look, thank you very much for speaking to us. It sounds like you've got a very busy rest of the year ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much.